Good evening. Welcome to Real Beans. I'm Ben Schneider, and today we're going to talk about one of the most influential films in cinema history, Psycho. This black and white nightmare follows a woman who has stolen money and what our conscience and subconscious can do to us. As we discuss the film, we will have some commentary from Casey and Alan, whose reflections had been heard on this podcast previously. Casey had never seen this film before, so it was wonderful to have a fresh perspective on a film that has been in pop culture for so many years. Pairing with Psycho is another staple you'll find in lodgings around the country: Nespresso single-serve coffee. I hope you enjoy your stay. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm about to take a shower. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in as we dive into one of my favorite films and sip what might be the best single-serve coffee on the market. A quick warning before we check in: there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen Psycho, pause here, watch it, and come back. Psycho, directed by the master of suspense Alfred Hitchcock, came right after his smash hit North by Northwest. Looking for something a little darker, he discovered Robert Bloch's novel and saw potential. Studios weren't interested, deeming it too grim and too strange. So Hitchcock financed it himself with a modest budget of $800,000, using the crew from his TV series Alfred Hitchcock Presents. What he created became a phenomenon. The film went on to gross more than $50 million, making it his most financially successful project. It also proved that independent low-budget filmmaking could be good, profitable, and groundbreaking. Psycho's success reshaped the horror genre, inspiring future masters like Brian De Palma, John Carpenter, and Wes Craven, and so many others who built their masterpiece on its foundation. However, in today's world, the horrific scenes that once shocked audiences in 1960 no longer hold true in 2025. Audiences have become so desensitized by the ultra-violence seen on film and TV, what was once shocking to audiences and made people faint now comes off as unintentional laughter. People today still find Psycho a fun watch, and the psychological suspense that Hitchcock throws in makes it one of the most effective films ever created. But before we dive into Psycho, let's take a quick coffee break. For today's brew, we are discussing the popular company Nespresso. Since 1986, Nespresso has pioneered the creation of espresso drinks with the touch of a button. According to Nespresso, their in-house research and development team have figured out a way to use Swiss technology and skilled engineering to create machines that deliver the exact amount of water, temperature, pressure, and speed to unlock the full aroma and crema of their coffees. The machine consistently provides a perfect cup of coffee. Naturally, Nespresso has its critics. I came across an article from a site called Quartz, where the author claimed to be bewildered by the popularity of the coffee and the machines. While I did agree with some of the points, such as the inability to control the brewing process, what really irked me was their audacity to claim that they weren't coffee snobs and would drink Dunkin' Donuts, which, by the way, isn't that bad. Then, saying that whoever likes the taste of Nespresso also hates the taste of coffee. But then again, coffee is subjective, so some may not like the taste or the brewing process. But that doesn't mean that you have to insult other coffee drinkers. I may not understand why people add cream and sugar to their coffee, but I know it's what they enjoy. I will hands down say I am a coffee snob, as I do enjoy single-origin roast, specialty blends, various ways to brew coffee, and I drink it black. But I will defend Nespresso and its taste. Given the wide variety of pods, it's challenging to love them all. There are many I dislike the taste of, as they are too bitter or sometimes burnt. But I do find consistency in the way the machine brews. Plus, if there is a blend I don't like, I'll use the milk foaming machine to create a latte. My favorite pods are the Arpeggio, the Paris Espresso, which I find very strong, and Stockholm Lungo. I enjoy their seasonal flavors as well, especially those with spice notes, as they taste like Christmas. Those are available now. My biggest issue with Nespresso is that not all flavors are available in both pod sizes. Nespresso offers two different types of pods, the original, which is a smaller pod, and the Virtuo pod, which is much larger and more round. Many times I've seen flavors that look good, but only to find out that they're only available in the larger pod, so I couldn't test them out. The Virtuo seems to be gaining traction and popularity, but I think the original fits the bill for a 1-cup espresso machine. People complain about the waste created by single pods, and that's a significant issue. However, Nespresso offers a recycling program that allows you to return the pods in a special bag provided by the company, so you can still help the environment and enjoy your cup. You'd be hard-pressed not to find a machine in many hotels and sometimes motels. For high-end hotels, Nespresso provides a luxury feel for their guests. When I stay at a hotel like that, I really find the hotel nice and that they take care of their guests. For a single-serve pod machine, Nespresso is hands down the winner over the K-Cup machines, as you won't find consistency with the K-Cups. The reason for this inconsistency is likely due to the fact that there are many companies that make their own pods for the machine. There is no quality control. Some taste fine, but others can taste like dirty socks. There are non-Nespresso-made pods, but so far none have matched the flavor and feel of the Nespresso pod, a sign of good quality control and care. The only other pod for the Nespresso machine that I have enjoyed was Starbucks Blonde Roast. You can find Nespresso machines at many home goods stores and on their website, Nespresso.com. And now let's check into the Bates Motel. In Psycho, Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh, grows weary of her secret affair and impulsively steals $40,000 to start a new life with her lover, Sam Loomis, played by John Gavin. Fleeing Phoenix, she's overcome by guilt and paranoia until a storm leads her to the remote Bates Hotel, run by the shy, unsettling Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins. Over dinner, their quiet conversation about loneliness and going a little mad sometimes hints at a deeper darkness. Deciding to return back to Phoenix, Marion steps into the shower, unaware that someone is watching her, setting off one of cinema's most chilling turns and a mystery that unravels within the walls of the Bates Motel. When you revisit a film like Psycho, you can discover new gems that you may have missed before. For me, the film remains impactful and terrifying. I was fortunate enough to see Psycho before watching other ultra-violent films, so moments like the shower scene and the final climax made me squirm and close my eyes. The film opens with one of the most striking sequences in cinema history. It's the title credits designed by Saul Bass, who created some of Hitchcock's most iconic visuals. His jagged typography dances across the screen, slicing through the frames like a nervous heartbeat. Coupled with Bernard Herrmann's haunting all-string score, violins shrieking and cellos creeping, it becomes a character in its own right. Let's talk a little bit about Bernard Herrmann. Bernard Herrmann was a staple in Hitchcock films, scoring 8 films during what might be considered Hitchcock's golden era, with hits like Rear Window, Vertigo, and North by Northwest. Herrmann would score numerous films in his career, including Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. His scores often became a character in the film, not just underscoring, but really putting you in the mood and matching what is happening right in front of you. Not gimmicky or grandiose, but methodical and exciting. Psycho is no exception, with the haunting violins and other stringed instruments setting the scene for what is to come, with now the famous screeching violins during the shower scene. My favorite scene that uses the score perfectly is when the private detective goes to the Bates Motel, and when he steps inside the house, the room is still and quiet, and all you hear is Bernard Herrmann's violins playing 3 or 4 notes, as if someone is walking slowly behind you. And then the violins shriek as Mrs. Bates murders him on the stairs. Herrmann, of course, should have been nominated and won for Best Score for this. But most scores nominated that year were given to big, sweeping epics. So, of course, the Academy wouldn't think of having a horror film nominated in that category. Janet Leigh, who plays Marion Crane, adds a sympathetic dimension to her character, while also demonstrating her inability to lie convincingly as she attempts to escape with the stolen money. She exhibits signs of guilt when a police officer pulls her over, high-pressuring a car salesman so she can buy a car and pay in cash, and at the Bates Motel, where she initially claims to be Marie Samuels, but later mistakenly reveals to Norman that she is Miss Crane and heading back to Phoenix. Leigh also showcases a more cunning side to Marion. As she drives towards Sam, she imagines, or possibly envisions, what is happening back at the office, and she flashes a devious grin while contemplating how she got away with stealing the money in front of her boss and the unscrupulous millionaire. When she takes a shower, it symbolizes her attempt to cleanse herself of the darker impulses that she has embraced, returning to the morally upright Marion she was at the beginning of the film. Anthony Perkins portrays Norman Bates in a very sympathetic light. He plays Norman like a lost puppy, trapped by a domineering mother who prevents him from growing up and becoming his own person. Norman becomes infatuated with Marion Crane, believing that she might be the one to help him escape from his situation. Unfortunately, his mother has so profoundly influenced him that she takes over and murders anyone perceived as a threat to their relationship. When Marion suggests placing his mother in a facility, Norman reacts with anger. He insists that she isn't a maniac. She just has moments of madness. This leads to the film's most famous line, "We all go a little mad sometimes." After Marion's death, viewers start to empathize with Norman as he cleans up the aftermath of his mother's action, trying to fulfill his role as a good son. Perkins depicts this complexity, maintaining a subtle portrayal of insanity without going overboard. If either of these characters had been exaggerated, the film would have failed. Although both commit evil acts, they remain relatable and evoke empathy. Hitchcock skillfully draws the audience in and even makes them complicit in the wrongdoings of his main characters. There are various details that Hitchcock threw in to add foreshadowing and character traits. For example, when Marion is pure and with her morals in check, she wears a white bra and slip. But later, after she takes the money and bolts, she's wearing a black bra and slip, signifying the difference between good and evil. I noticed how in their conversation Norman says, "I like stuffing things." It's such an eerie clue. He's talking about taxidermy, but he's also telling us precisely what he did to his mother. Another sequence I noticed that built a lot of tension was when the detective gets murdered. You see him slowly walking up the stairs, and moments later, the camera shows you the door to Mrs. Bates' bedroom slowly opening. You don't know when the attack is going to happen, and you see the detective continue without knowing that he's about to be the next victim. Hitchcock was a genius with the red herring and the release of information. He doesn't withhold something that is just going to shock you for a few moments, but helps build the suspense so that you go on a ride, almost like a roller coaster. Hitchcock would always discuss the difference between shock and building tension in a scene.
The essential fact is, to get real suspense, you must let the audience have information. Now let's take the old-fashioned bomb theory. You and I are sitting talking, we'll say, about baseball. We're talking for 5 minutes. Suddenly a bomb goes off, and the audience have a 10-second terrible shock. Now, let's take the same situation, tell the audience at the beginning that under the table, and show it to them, there's a bomb, and it's going to go off in 5 minutes. And we talk baseball. What are the audience doing? They're saying, don't talk about baseball. There's a bomb under there. Get rid of it.
Today we find few films that give you this type of information to create suspense. Typically, horror films and slashers provide you with shock after shock with no payoff or break in the action. The worst example is the jump scare, where you expect something suspenseful to happen only to have it turn out to be a cat or another person jumping out, which frightens the main character for a split second. Even though critics and studios at the time dismissed Psycho as a lowbrow horror flick, the film was a smash hit and went on to be nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Director for Hitchcock and Best Supporting Actress for Janet Leigh. Horror films rarely receive nominations, and it still remains a very uncommon occurrence. I watched the film Psycho with my friends Casey and Alan, who have been guests on this podcast before, and it was Casey's first time watching the film, which made it a perfect opportunity to watch somebody watch it with fresh eyes. Alan and I had seen it before, but this time we were able to focus on finding new details that Hitchcock cleverly hides in plain sight. Watching Psycho with a contemporary perspective really highlights how far horror has come since the 1960s. Back then you had the Hays Code, which was still in effect, and that meant that Hitchcock couldn't show blood, nudity, or explicit violence. Instead, he used implication, through sound, editing, and suggestions, to evoke horror rather than rely on graphic visuals. The now famous shower scene never actually shows the knife piercing Marion's body. We hear the slicing of the knife, see her struggle, and our imaginations fill in the gaps. Alan pointed out that the scene feels a little theatrical by today's standards. Hitchcock doesn't directly show you the violence, but instead he dares you to believe that it's happening. It's storytelling, Allen said, but it is also artfulness through psychosexual metaphor and symbolism. What seems tame now was revolutionary at the time. He added that the shower set design with the white tiles and curtains contrasted with the blood, and it makes the scene even more striking. I think if this had been in color, the shock would have been overwhelming. And the blood? Why, it was Hershey's syrup. Allen laughed, noted that the texture and the way it dissolves, it was a brilliant low-tech solution for the show. Both Casey and Allen remarked that the scene now resembles, quote, bad theater. Yet they agreed that Hitchcock aimed to create something artistic rather than realistic. It's this tension between realism and stylization that keeps the film engaging. And now the film shifts entirely to focus on Norman Bates. What's remarkable is how sympathetic Norman comes across. Anthony Perkins doesn't portray Norman as a monster. He plays him as a confused and fragile son. Casey remarked no wonder he is psycho, because Norman's mother groomed and oppressed him to such an extent that he never fully matured. Mother took care of everything, and loved him a bit too much. So, when someone comes between them, Mother snaps. Allen elaborated. Before he gets jealous, they have this inappropriate intimate relationship. You can see the way he acts out during the adult conversations. He's still a little boy at heart. That dynamic is played out beautifully in the parlor scene. Norman invites Marion in for dinner, and you hear his mother berating him from upstairs. Allen perfectly described the moment. He likes Marion and wants to win her sympathy by allowing her to overhear how his mother treats him. Allen caught another detail. Norman misinterprets Marion's comments about running away together, and you can almost see him imagining it, until he remembers that I'll be the one in the madhouse next. That's the tragedy of Norman Bates. He is aware of his own imprisonment. As the story unfolds, Marion's moral crisis parallels some of Norman's psychological struggles. They are both trapped. Hitchcock uses visual storytelling to illustrate this connection. Casey pointed out that Marion's struggle is relatable to everyone. If you saw a large sum of money in front of you, you'd at least think about taking it. However, with Marion, she is too moral to be successful in her wrongdoing. Allen added that it's heartbreaking. She almost escapes. She could have gone back, returned the money, and Sam would have accepted being poor. She almost lived. Casey noted that in situations like this, things typically worsen the deeper one gets into the web of lies and deceit. We discussed the ending, specifically the exposition scene with the psychiatrist, as he tries to explain what is happening in Norman's mind. Some viewers find this heavy-handed, but we thought it was essential. They needed to explain, Allen agreed, saying that it makes the scene worthwhile. The writing is efficient, it feels lengthy, but it conveys everything and ties everything up nicely. Ultimately, Psycho reveals the fragility of the human mind and how trauma can split a person into two. Allen summed it up beautifully. It remains fascinating because we are still intrigued. The real Ed Gein, the psychosexual Oedipal themes, the layers, it all resonates. One of the most interesting discussions I had with Allen and Casey was about the presentation of the now famous shower scene in Psycho. Casey found it unrealistic because you never actually see the knife enter the body. And thanks to the Hays Code, this made it virtually impossible for Hitchcock to actually show the knife enter the body. Thankfully, the Hays Code ended in 1968. And since 1968, movies have become more violent and gory, which makes it understandable why younger audiences might be desensitized to a film like Psycho, where the story unfolds more slowly than usual. Allen mentioned that when MTV came along and started editing films at a faster pace, and with platforms such as TikTok, where everything is short form, slower films don't stand a chance, as because people want snappier content. And why do people laugh at the shower scene? By not showing the knife actually enter the body, the scene becomes somewhat unbelievable, especially in the context of modern horror films like Saw, Final Destination, and the Friday the 13th franchise. Had the Hays Code not existed, Psycho might have aligned more closely with the horror staples from the 1970s to today. However, I don't think Hitchcock would have wanted to include more gore, blood, or nudity, as he wasn't interested in depicting vulgar scenes in films. While he had a dark sense of humor, he found vulgarity distasteful. It's fascinating how Psycho once left audiences screaming and fainting in 1960. Yet today, many people watch the shower scene and laugh. We've simply seen too much. Over the past 6 decades, horror has evolved from implied terror to explicit violence. We've watched heads roll in HD, seen monsters rendered with precision, and have become so accustomed to blood splatter that a few streaks of Hershey's syrup down the shower drain barely register anymore. In Hitchcock's day, what you didn't see haunted you. The imagination filled in the blanks far worse than any special effects could. Nowadays, we expect filmmakers to show everything. Somewhere along the line, we seem to have traded suspense for spectacle. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Horror has always reflected its audience's appetite. But it does mean that Psycho impacts viewers differently now. Modern audiences are trained to anticipate jump scares rather than the quiet dread preceding them. While we have become desensitized to visual violence, we are deeply unsettled by emotional violence, by feelings of guilt, obsession, and loneliness. This is where Hitchcock still prevails. Even if we don't flinch at the knife anymore, Psycho still probes something more profound. The fear that someone could appear perfectly ordinary on the outside while hiding something monstrous on the inside. As I was doing my research, I wanted to watch a reaction video on YouTube featuring a younger film buff experiencing Psycho for the first time. I was amazed to see, whether they meant to or not, many scenes that made them jump and scream a bit. They had questions about the shower scene, of course, and the character's motivation, but ultimately found the film to be very effective, particularly with its twists and turns. I remember many years ago I shared the film Psycho with a friend who exclaimed that the shower scene was one of the worst edited pieces of filmmaking she'd ever seen. My mother, like many from her generation, was deeply affected by the film and refuses to watch it due to the content. This mirrors a comment that Casey made during our conversation about how we experience a kind of telephone effect when discussing particular films, which can distort perceptions of movies like Psycho. While Psycho has been regarded as an ultra-violent film filled with gore and bloodshed, the actual content is much less graphic than most people would expect. What are your thoughts on Psycho? Did it shock you when you first saw it? Or were you indifferent about it? I'm fascinated by what people think of old horror films that at their time were considered some of the scariest stories put to film. Norman Bates was based on the serial killer Ed Gein, a notable figure in pop culture, influencing films like Psycho, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Silence of the Lambs, and most recently Ryan Murphy's miniseries. The character and story are captivating and lend themselves to excellent drama. You can watch Psycho on Peacock and Amazon.com. The film Psycho might feel a bit mild by 2025 standards, but it is an absolute gem worth revisiting. After watching Monster, Ed Gein on Netflix, I'm excited about a potential revival of Psycho, especially since it's mentioned in the miniseries. Alfred Hitchcock's films always offer something more profound, making any of his works a captivating experience. And on another note completely, don't overlook Nespresso. While it may not always be the first choice among coffee machines, its rich taste and delightful texture are worth discovering. So let's step out of the Bates Motel and enjoy our last sip. A special thanks to Casey Hultum and Alan Stafford for their contributions. I want to thank you all for joining me on this adventure. And until next time, remember, sip, watch, repeat. Thank you for joining me here on Real Beans. If you enjoyed this episode, like and subscribe. Visit our website at realbeans.com for more updates and recommendations. If you know someone who would enjoy this podcast, please share it. Previous episodes can be found on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. If you'd like to support the channel, visit realbeans.com/support.